Welcome to Innovation Tales, your go-to podcast for the human side of digital transformation.
Welcome back to Innovation Tales and the second part of my interview with Ian Johnston. Last time we covered the iterative approach, funding models, and the importance of people in digital transformation. However, with over 30 years of experience in the field, Ian's insights were too numerous to fit into a single episode. As the co-founder of AI4Process, Ian's ideally placed to tell us about artificial intelligence. So today we cover the latest use cases, consider risks, and discuss the AI capabilities available in Pega. And as a bonus, you'll want to stick to the end of the episode to hear my guest reveal his secret to reuse. But let's start with Ian's description of his professional journey, only a fraction of which made it into the first episode. So without further ado, let's continue the conversation with Ian Johnston.
I started off life in banking in the city, in trading systems and banking systems, and then I did a project for HP, for the company I was working for at the time, and they had this workflow system which I thought was really cool, where you could build a process and control a process and the user interface. And about that time, I was headhunted by a guy who was working on behalf of Pega, trying to build up the Pega team in the UK. I had already had the interest in workflow. He was a company that was starting off in the UK, looking for people like me. So it sounded like a really interesting.
So the technology was already on your radar as something that you'd like to get more experience with, yeah?
Yeah, definitely.
And once you got into Pega, what did you find?
Yeah, that was in 1994 when I started with Pega, and it was the mainframe VAX VMS based predecessor to what Pega have now, Pega Infinity, which was the old Pega Works system. And they had a small number of clients in Europe, and they were building a team and trying to build things up in the UK. So we started off as what we call client consultants. So we did everything, from being the account manager to doing the design and build and managing the team on a project. So it was, it was a pretty full-on role.
And is that part of what made you stick with it at the beginning?
Yeah, I mean, there's the great thing about what Pega did with the product over the years was they were continually innovating. I mean, they were one of the first people to start using a markup language, which turned into HTML, for instance, for the UI, and in all sorts of other areas. They kept evolving the technology and the breadth of the functionality. So your learning curve wasn't taking a dive, and it was always interesting, and you were always up to date in terms of technology and where that was going. So it was kept interesting, and that's the main thing, really. I'm a techie at heart. Obviously, you have to perform many roles as you move through life as a consultant. But from a technology point of view, it always kept the interest up.
Yeah. Well, definitely the evergreen aspect of the Pega technology, that you kind of go through these waves of modernization, and you're not necessarily doing the modernization, but you're kind of taking on the wave yourself, right? As you're accompanying your clients. In my case, I remember, at least two big transitions between different UI technologies, UI stacks.
Yep.
And take those clients from one generation and one set of technologies to the next without, necessarily having to throw away everything. Mm-hmm. I think that's what you were talking about, right?
Yeah, there was a natural progression for clients of Pega's to be able to, move from one technology to the other. Probably not, moving from Works to what was Pega Rules at the time and now is, Pega Infinity. Moving from one to the other was not something that you could just do an upgrade, run some code and do it. And you probably wouldn't want to either, because, typically when if you have a technology that's 5 to 10 years old and you're moving to the latest one, what you do and what your business does and the processes and what, the capability of the tool is so much better that you don't really want to do a straight upgrade anyway. You want to do a redesign and a rebuild. But what you do have is you have a really great, because you've already got a system, you've got a really great set of, basic requirements that you can then look at and say, how am I going to make this better, and what do I need now, and what's the technology capable of? So, just upgrading from, 1.0 to 2.0 is not necessarily what you want to do.
Yeah, definitely not a straight upgrade. I guess the people stay as well, right? You're upgrading the technology, you're keeping some things, and like you say, you already have your specifications, but then also a lot of the people that have invested time into learning the technology can continue to evolve with it, right?
Yeah, and I think it's something like Pega and a lot of other tools. Essentially they stay the same. Their core stays the same. So your expertise in moving from Pega Works as we had originally to Pega Rules was the same people who had all the knowledge on Works were then able to very quickly move into the new environment and be fairly quickly efficient and knowledgeable about that technology as well, because the fundamentals are not changing.
Blueprints of Innovation.
So Ian, for that second segment, we usually focus on tools and technologies. And when we were preparing the interview, we of course mentioned artificial intelligence. It's everywhere these days. So with your amazing and very wide experience of Pega, how do you think this is going to change that ecosystem?
Well, I think there's a lot of stuff that's evolving. A lot of ways people are potentially looking at using AI in their businesses, and I think a lot of there's a lot of hype and a lot of talk around it, but actually coming up with a use case in your business is if you're not using something that's off the shelf that everybody else is doing, then it can be quite difficult, and you need to have bought into the art of what you can do within the organization. You need to have looked at that, and then you need to know what you can do and how it would benefit you in order to get the best out of it. Using a couple of examples, for instance, so you can use our AI in a process to determine which route you take down a process, based on what happened before, what was the most effective way of handling this particular customer issue or whatever. And you can use AI and machine learning to get better at it and things like that. And that's one way. But you need to have worked out at what point in your business processes is this applicable, and how much benefit is it going to provide. So you need to be quite intelligent, and you need, in terms of understanding how it can benefit and what it's capable of doing. I think the other type of AI that's quite interesting at the moment is more the generative stuff, which it can help you write an email, it can help you write a book, it can help you design an application just by writing a few words, which is great. And you can use it to do something small, like writing an email to a customer, or you could, like the Pega blueprint, ask it to build you an application, and it will build you an initial application design that you can then put into your Pega system, and it will create something which will be a starting point. So it's an accelerator to get where you want to go. But I think the process AI, where you're actually determining how to handle real life situations with customers or whatever, is probably the one that is going to get the biggest business benefit in the long run. The generative stuff will help you get from nowhere to something to start with very quickly, which is good. But applications are seldom that easy. Very easy to create demo systems, very easy to create something basic and something as a starting point, which is great, but it's never going to be where you want to end up. So you've always got to take that and enhance it, build on it, change it, and get to where you're going to go. Out of a project life cycle, how much of the project is that piece that initially creates you something which is demonstrable, versus how much of the project is then to get that into production. those are the two areas that seem to be prevalent in our world at the moment, the sort of the process AI and then the generative. And it's up to us in this industry to point out where the quick wins are, where businesses can take something that's out of the box in the way that it works, the application works, and can be immediately applied, and a lot of business would benefit from that kind of thing. The core business and integrating machine learning into the processes is something that requires a lot more thought. I think the marketing, the intelligent marketing, that's been around for quite a long time.
Yeah.
It's the newer stuff, which is, the how do I utilize AI in my processes? How do I utilize AI in generation of artifacts? Is the newer stuff.
Well, focusing for now on the process part, what kind of approaches have you experimented with, especially which ones work, in order to identify these use cases with clients? Is there any lessons learned already that help, organizations narrow down this part of the, discovering the art of the possible?
I think it's having done something previously with a customer that you can then replicate with a client, rather, you can then replicate to further clients that are in a similar industry. Mm-hmm. So, for instance, in AI4Process, we have a collections framework. We've enhanced the collections framework from Pega, and we use that in a number of our clients, and we use the AI capabilities within that to essentially improve collection rates with customers. So, when you're going to...
Predicting which course of action, I suppose?
Exactly. Predicting which course of action is going to give you the best returns. And that's a sort of an established way of doing it. And, most businesses who sell things to customers have collections departments and need collection systems. And therefore it's something that could be applicable to any business. But to go into a business from scratch and try and work out where they could use AI and machine learning in their processes is something that needs, a lot of expertise from who is going into to do the study, and it requires again expertise in the business to to help work out where they could gain the most from this type of technology. And I'm sure most businesses can gain a lot in one or other aspects of this technology, be it decision making or generative or marketing or whatever. I'm sure all businesses can. But it's coming up with those use cases that are going to really give them the best benefit based on the cost and based on the fact that you need some pretty intelligent people in your organization and to help you from organizations like ours to actually get there. And they require constant, once they're in and up and running, they require constant attention and maintenance generally.
The models.
You need to monitor them. You need the models and the use of the models within the organization. So it's not something that you're as likely to do, as in a traditional model where you create something and you put it live and then it runs until it's, superseded or enhanced or whatever. This is going to need attention all the time, and your data is going to need constant maintenance.
And so what changes from an organizational perspective? Are there more operational roles because of that?
Clearly, yes. So you've got your data scientist roles, but you've also got, a wider role in terms of, maintaining the whole AI capabilities across your business processes, and making sure that they're doing what you need them to do, monitoring them, tweaking them, changing the algorithms, changing the models, whatever, where necessary. I think that's an ongoing role.
And I should have probably started with that, given how new all of this is, but I'm pretty sure that some people in our audience will not know too much about the machine learning available for the process side of things. So maybe we should just briefly kind of summarize what we're talking about. Would you mind?
Yeah, sure. I suppose we did touch on a little bit earlier where you may have a business process which, in its simplest form, you could take route A or route B. And what machine learning would allow you to do is to looking at what you know about this particular situation, be it a customer situation, a transaction, or whatever. What you know means that you have a better chance of success if you go on route A or route B. Then what you need is a feedback loop. So if you send a customer down route A, for instance, and it doesn't succeed, that gets fed back into the model so that next time he's more likely to take route B, for instance. So it's thinking about where in your organization's business processes can you benefit from the system learning which treatment of which customer is going to, yield you better return, based on everything you know about that customer and all the customers that have gone before.
And I guess this is where you need quite a bit of data for these models to be able to work, right?
Yeah. So it's not something. I mean, it depends on the frequency that these decisions are being taken on. So if it's high frequency and you're getting very very quick feedback, then it's not going to take very long in terms of elapsed time for it to learn. A longer time period, then it could take quite a while to get the data to learn what is going to be the best benefit.
Mm. And so coming back to the iterative approach that we were discussing in the previous segment, it sounds like AI would, because of that data requirement, would be somewhere further down the line, not something that you start with, or at least when it comes to the process AI. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, but how far down the line is dependent. And there are pre-built models as well for some, situations that would already get you to, somewhere, a starting point where it would be intelligent enough to, not make the wrong decisions from the beginning.
So coming back to now the second part, the generative models, you were saying that it's not going to get you 100%, right? It accelerates the way that you maybe start a new project, a new application. What about from an operational side? What use cases do you see for that capability for operational use cases?
By operational, we talking project life cycle?
As in not as tools for developers or other engineers, but as tools for the end users.
So something as simple as writing a document or writing an email or a letter or something like that would be an example, for instance. Yes. Yeah. And again, that's great as long as the generative algorithms are using data which your business is going to be happy creating this content with. So, one of the big issues that would stop businesses from, using something like generative is if the data is sourced from outside of the organization and therefore you don't know or you don't have control of what gets produced. So there's all sorts of implications there.
Including intellectual property concerns.
Yes. So if the data is sourced from internal data sources, then within the business or within the data source which is well known or specific to what you need, then you can be happier that what it's going to generate is not going to cause litigation at some point in the future, or not just do something that's plain wrong. And not right, which is, could cause your business some damage.
Well, one thing that could happen is that the typical shape, form of our workflows is going to start integrating these steps, just like, previously we'd have, typically somebody does a piece of work and somebody else does a 4-eyes check later just to make sure that everything was done correctly. That kind of building blocks tend to be quite everywhere in our
Generic,
workflows.
yeah.
And would you also expect that these generic building blocks would start incorporating like a generative AI phase and then give it to a user before the user does anything, before a human being does anything, that there would be already almost for every step in the process some work being done by a generative AI model?
Potentially, yes. Yes.
And what are the maybe limits where that doesn't work? Where can we not do this? And I think you already, identified one area, which is like if the data is sourced from the outside, if we are not in control of the data. What other risks are associated with generative AI?
Good question. I don't know. Obviously, you're risking your sources, so you're risking the things we talked about, which is, inaccuracy of data, copyright or whatever.
How about losing control of the models, lack of transparency in some industries where it's just not acceptable, that sort of thing?
Yeah, lack of transparency is a big one, isn't it? Because you need to be able to, in a lot of cases, businesses need to be able to explain their decisions and or how the decision was come to. And if you don't have control of that decision-making process, if it's outside the organization or even if it's inside the organization, if you can't explain it, you could create something that somebody could perceive as sexist or racist or, something of that order that the model has come up with, which a human being necessarily wouldn't do because they have certain controls. So I can see that. There's all sorts of things that you need to think about if you're creating something using generative that you're then going to publish in any way, shape, or form outside or even inside of the organization as well, because it could still come back to bite you. I think a lot of those risks are going to put a lot of people off in some businesses from taking the generative stuff on. And the process AI as well to a certain extent, because again, you need to be able to explain how it came up with its decision in some circumstances. And a lot of the AI models are able to do that.
And beyond the Pega ecosystem, what other big changes do you see on the horizon as regards to artificial intelligence?
Progress that everything is going to make, and certainly software is going to make. So up until this point, mainly you've got humans creating software which does things better than human can. But now you've got the extra dimension, which is now humans have now created the software, and now the software creates the software, and it can iterate and improve it, at so much of a faster rate. So you're going to get, I would have thought, the software starting to write the software a lot more, and potentially it's going to be exponential, the improvement in what the software can do, because now you've got the software writing the software, and it's so much faster at iterating than we are. I think that's the big difference. And it looks as though it's going to, it's really going to take off fast. But I think a lot of businesses, there's going to be some businesses that really benefit from it, and there's going to be a lot of other businesses that are going to be waiting around to see what happens and don't have the expertise, vision, whatever, to be able to take advantage of it.
And so as we're talking about the human side of digital transformation on the show, what can we recommend to the leaders today in order to be ready for this revolution?
I think it's about keeping up with what is practical at this point, and the art of what is practically possible at the moment. Just saying we want to use AI in our organization in some way, shape, or form is a good start, but you need to take a look at what it can do and what the potential is within your organization, within the practicalities of what we have at the moment. And certainly taking advantage of some of the sort of more off-the-shelf capabilities would be a reasonable starting point.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite example of maybe a slightly unusual application or use case for AI that you could share with us?
Probably not unusual. I think we've been playing a lot within our innovation with chatbots, for instance, using other technologies, to Pega, such as Camunda and things like that, using more generic AI models that are available. The thing that I've noticed is that actually not all, but a few chatbots that you interact with online are actually doing stuff now that is useful, and they're actually able to communicate with you much better than they used to be able to. And, the lines are being blurred between the human and the machine to a certain extent. So I think to me, the advancements in chatbots over the last year or two, from things that were just useless and just kept popping up on the website every time and, obscuring your view of what you wanted to see, to now, when you want to do something with the customer service department, that they actually get you in much more quickly than picking up the phone, and they're actually able to solve your issues. Not in every case. There's still a lot of bad ones out there, but I've been pleasantly surprised by how good some of these things are, and how human-like they are, without being too naff or condescending or rude or
It's amazing
whatever.
to think that we expected chatbots before generative AI to be useful, and now in hindsight, it seems absurd that the way that we would build those V1 version 1 chatbots with like trees of decisions and was very clunky, right? I guess what you're referring to is that now we actually have the tools to make that kind of instant interaction, much more useful.
Yeah, and I think the generative is a big part of that, because they're not just going down a decision tree as you mentioned, and they're able to add nuance and,
or at least understand what you tell them.
Understand what you tell them, rather than just looking for keywords in your sentence that you've put in there. Yeah,
indeed. It's quite both creepy and amazing, I think.
Yeah. I think one of the most impressive is the fact that now in the medical world, for instance, care, so care for older people or whatever, they can give older people companions who interact with them, who may be AI, and they're not a real person, but actually they're better than real people in a number of ways. They're more patient. They've much better listeners. They don't get emotional or upset or whatever. They're available 24 hours a day. There's a lot to be said for for using this kind of technology in places that's appropriate.
Yeah, definitely as a complement, I suppose, not necessarily as a replacement, but it certainly can be something that brings additional connectivity or feeling of being connected to people. And I, for one, definitely enjoy that part of.
Innovators Playbook.
And as we are about to wrap up, are there any final topics you'd like to cover?
Yeah, I think there's one thing we haven't really touched on, which is a subject that's quite close to my heart, which is reuse. And I think there's a couple of points here that I've found throughout my career that some people concentrate, or they think reuse is being able to create reusable code. And I think a lot of the fact is missed that you can get reuse of ideas, and you can get reuse out of not making the same mistakes again, which is another one. So actually, if you build something and you roll it out into production and it doesn't work, that's as good a reuse example as actually building something that works well and you roll out and you can then reuse it. So you know what not to build next time. So that's very important. So that's one example. And also with these new technologies, I think reuse, where you can build things very quickly, build functionality and business processes very quickly. You don't need to reuse the code because you can just rewrite it or rebuild it very quickly, but in the new way that was slightly different to the old way, which didn't work as well as you'd hoped. So now you can just throw it away and rebuild it from a code point of view, but you're not throwing away the ideas or the previous experience of not quite getting it right. So if you think about a project life cycle, back to the life cycle again, how much time from the beginning to the end of the project is stuff actually being built? And it's probably less than a quarter. It should be less than a quarter. So actually everything else you do is much bigger proportion of the project. So if you have to rebuild something, but you already have a basic design which you're gonna tweak, the requirements new requirements which are slightly different, it's much quicker to rebuild something rather than try and reuse something that wasn't 100% right in the first place.
Yeah, so
if that makes sense.
Reuse is almost like learning at an organizational level, at a team level.
Yes, and you can spend a lot of time trying to build reusable code, which makes it very complex, very difficult to maintain, and you just end up rewriting it anyway because it's too difficult to understand how it works and maintain it.
Yeah, and by the time you're trying to reuse it for the second, third, fourth time, you've moved on with other ideas, right? So
absolutely,
your initial code needs adjusting anyways. Perfect. Well, that's been a really good advice to finish on. And Ian, thank you very much for coming onto the show. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Me too. Thanks, Alex.
And that concludes our deep dive with Ian Johnston. Today we covered the use cases and risks of Pega's AI capabilities. I hope that provided valuable guidance to anyone looking to integrate artificial intelligence into their business processes. I feel we were so lucky to have someone with Ian's background on the show. If that made you think of another expert who would be a great guest, please visit our website and fill out the guest recommendation form. We have more topics and guest appearances lined up, so stay tuned for more tales of innovation that inspire, challenge, and transform. Until next time, peace.
Thanks for tuning in to Innovation Tales. Get inspired, connect with other practitioners, and approach the digital revolution with confidence. Visit innovation-tales.com for more episodes. See you next time.